and the value of his reputation as a crime boss, which helped him be, shall we say, persuasive. While later gangsters like John Gotti might be able to emulate the kind of celebrity that Costello enjoyed, they couldn't hold a candle to the power Costello had amassed. Certainly, Gotti and other mafiosi of his era could kill and grab millions of dollars from their crime family rackets. But Costello didn't have to resort to the gun to get what he wanted. He was not soft by any means. George Wolfe, Costello's trusted lawyer and friend for years, would remember after his death. On many occasions I found him frightening, but he was human. He was civilized. He spurned the bloody violence in which previous bosses had reveled. Costello's friends and peers in the Mafia were men like Charles Lucky Luciano, Joseph Adonis, and Albert Anastasia, leaders who bloodied their hands in the great mob power struggles of the 1930s, and became legends in their own right. But Costello wisely saw the usefulness of corrupting and influencing politicians and police as a way of assuring that what would become La Cosa Nostra could operate in New York with little interference. Costello built alliances with Jewish gangsters like Meyer Lansky and had no trouble working with Irishmen like bootlegger William V. Dwyer and gambler Frank Erickson. For decades, with his political connections, Costello and the mob held sway, at least until reformist politicians like Fiorello LaGuardia conducted their own vendettas in an effort to trim Costello's sails. But to understand the real significance of Frank Costello is to acknowledge that he was a man who was also on a quest to be seen as legitimate, a criminal who could be accepted by society as a man of taste and culture. Costello was like the fictional bootlegger Jay Gatsby, striving to attain entry to the social upper crust and status. To do that, Costello and his wife Loretta bought the house in Sands Point, which in The Great Gatsby was located in the more exclusive fictional area of East Egg, the place where Gatsby himself could only aspire to be part of. In the novel, Gatsby's mansion was set in the somewhat socially inferior West Egg section, analogous to the current-day Great Neck. So in a sense, Costello got where Gatsby never could, and made an effort, sometimes successfully, to hobnob with his wealthy North Shore neighbors, like New York Newsday publisher Alicia Patterson. He came the closest of anybody could ever come to total legitimacy. Mafia journalist and screenwriter Nicholas Pileggi once said about Costello, "When all of these guys are out there shooting each other and acting like idiots, he was at the 1932 Democratic Presidential Convention, with the leader of Tammany nominating Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president in the Drake Hotel in Chicago." Still, as hard as he tried, Costello was never able to break through to the legitimate world the way he wanted. He survived mob wars, as well as a bungled attempt by Genovese to assassinate him, and a few efforts by the federal government early in life to put him in prison. But then LaGuardia and his allies, including the legendary Manhattan District Attorney Frank Hogan, started to nibble away at Costello's power, either using heavy-handed tactics to go after his slot machine empire, or by embarrassing politicians, judges, and police officials who were friendly, or financially indebted to him. To LaGuardia, Costello was a prime example of the crooks, thugs, bums, and chiselers whom he wanted to chase from New York City. It was a mission of LaGuardia, driven by his childhood memories of the way his family had been victimized by criminals, as well as a political rivalry his reform group had with Costello's friends in Tammany Hall. However, the real major public damage was done to Costello in 1951, when he decided to testify before the U.S. Senate Committee investigating organized crime. He thought it would be an opportunity to show the world his legitimate side. But in the end, it was from a public relations standpoint a tactical and strategic defeat. It was then that the American public saw Costello, mostly through television close-ups of his fidgeting hands and the sound of his gravelly voice, as the personification of the mob. He would protest his innocence and claim to be nothing more than a respectable businessman, dancing around questions by senators about his unsavory friends. But even children who watched the televised spectacle thought Costello was guilty of something. It turned out he would face another problem when his testimony soon after would lead to a conviction for contempt of Congress.